Good morning, everyone. Honorable Secretary for the Ministry for Agriculture and Forests of Bhutan, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. My name is David Daw, and I am the Conference Secretary for the 35th APRC. On behalf of the FAO Conference Secretariat, I have the honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to this opening session of the Senior Officers Meeting of the 35th session of FAO's Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. This is an historic meeting, as it's the very first FAO Regional Conference to be held virtually. In this regard, I would like to ask your compliance with a few Zoom practices or etiquette to facilitate the smooth functioning of the meeting. For optimal sound quality, both for speaking and listening, please wear a plugged-in headset if possible, instead of using the built-in speakers in your computer. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Please note that the chat function has been disabled for sending messages, except for a few from the conference secretariat. Interventions during all sessions, except for agenda item 11 on Thursday, will be on a first come, first served basis. To request to make an intervention, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and the Zoom software will indicate to the Secretariat the order in which hands were raised. Please note that on your own computer, you will be shown at the top of the list of participants. However, it's important to note that this does not mean you were the first one to raise your hand. Furthermore, some delegations may raise their hands using software other than Zoom and convey this information to the Secretariat. So based on all of this information, the chair will determine the order of speaking. We ask for your indulgence in this regard. When you are speaking, if possible, please remove your mask and then replace it when you are finished speaking. To express appreciation of someone's remarks, please use the clapping hands icon and the reactions button on the bottom toolbar. In order to see the speaker in full screen, please remember to select speaker view instead of gallery view in the upper right corner of your Zoom screen. We have simultaneous interpretation available in Chinese, French, and Russian. These are available in the interpretation button in the toolbar. During breaks of the meeting, even if you step away, please stay connected to this Zoom link, or else we will have to let you back in through the waiting room. Please send any questions or technical issues by email to APRC35, APRC35@FAO.org. We monitor this email continually and will respond to you as quickly as possible. For members, if you could please send us the email of a focal point for sharing successive versions of the conference report, that would be helpful. Many of you have already sent us that contact point by email. For those who have not, please do so at your earliest convenience. Finally, the order of the day and information for APRC are at the APRC website. So thank you very much for all your collaboration and cooperation. I realize that's a long list of requests, but I think they will make the meeting function much more smoothly. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Jungjin Kim, the Assistant Director General and FAO Regional Representative for Asia and the Pacific, to deliver his welcome remarks. Mr. Kim, please.
Thank you, David. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. I think we can begin this senior officers meeting of the 35th session of FAO's Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. It is great honor to welcome you to the virtual APRC. I would also like to extend a very warm thank you to the Royal Government of Bhutan for its steadfast support over many months in hosting the regional conference. As you know, the arrival of coronavirus coincided very closely with the original conference dated in mid-February. At that time, the risk to health was rapidly increasing and the travel was becoming difficult. The host government, in consultation with the FAO, decided to postpone the conference. And in hindsight, it turned out to be the right decision to take. Even today, more than 6 months later, large indoor gatherings are risky, and in many countries, they are still prohibited due to the concern that COVID-19 can spread among participants. For that reason, and also as international travel is more difficult than ever for members, the Royal Government of Bhutan and the FAO have moved forward with the virtual conference mode. We have done our best to prepare technically for this virtual modality, but we can anticipate there may be glitches here and there, such as local connectivity issues, etc. So we ask for your understanding and forbearance. The FAO Secretariat, which is supporting the Royal Government of Bhutan in running the meeting, is based at the regional conference, a regional office in Bangkok, Thailand. The days ahead of us will be busy. As you will have seen from the agenda, there are many items for discussion during this senior officers meeting. Clearly, the impact and response to the COVID-19 pandemic will be of paramount interest. But there are many other important items for discussion too. And I look forward to the next 2 days of deliberation with all of you. Thank you very much. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Kim, for your inspiring words on the opening of the regional conference. I'm sure your thoughtful guidance will be useful over the course of the next several days. I invite all assembled delegates to show their appreciation by using the clapping hands icon. May I now request the Honorable Dasho Rinzin Dorji, Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forests, Royal Government of Bhutan, to kindly deliver his address and declare open the senior officers meeting of the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. Dasho Dorji, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. Excellencies, heads of delegation of member countries, Mr. Jongjin Kim, the Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Asia and the Pacific of FAO, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to welcome all of you to the 35th session of the FAO Asia and the Pacific Regional Conference of the senior officers on behalf of the Royal Government of Bhutan. It is unfortunate that we are not able to welcome you in person to our country here in Bhutan due to the COVID-19 outbreak, which has become a global pandemic. However, recognizing the importance of the conference, the Royal Government of Bhutan is pleased to host this conference in a virtual modality. I would like to thank all the member countries for your support and acceptance of this virtual meeting. This is indeed a sign of solidarity and your according high importance to this regional conference by all our member countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our senior officers meeting is important in shaping and also guiding the ministers for making the right decisions and providing guidance to member countries and the FAO. I encourage the delegates to spare no efforts in discussing common issues for common impact and common benefit. As we all know, COVID-19 continues to confound the efforts of governments and public health authorities worldwide. Many countries in our region are making progress to reduce poverty and hunger. However, COVID-19 has upended that momentum. Our food security systems in this region has also been threatened. The COVID-19 has also provided us with opportunities to prioritize the country's actions. It will be in the larger interest of all the member countries of the region to discuss such concerns that will result in urgent actions to help our country to remain safe and secure. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to recognize and appreciate FAO's support and commitment to all our countries for food security through an integrated and consultative approach. FAO's technical support, including capacity building, has been effective, and I hope FAO will continue with such support. Before I end, let me again express my sincere appreciation to Mr. Jongjin Kim, the Assistant Director General and FAO Regional Representative for Asia and the Pacific, for his strong cooperation and the support that the host government received. At this point of time, I would also like to commend both the FAO and Bhutan team for successfully convening this virtual conference today. Let me once again welcome all the distinguished delegates and participants and wish you all a successful deliberations and a successful virtual conference. With this, I now declare the SOM, the Senior Officers Meeting, open. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dasho Dorji. You have delivered a most stimulating inaugural address that will serve to guide our deliberations in the coming 4 days. I invite the members to show their appreciation using the clapping hands icon. This concludes now the opening of the Senior Officers Meeting. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we have before us the first agenda item, election of the chairperson, vice chairperson, and appointment of the rapporteur. The floor is now open for the nomination of chairperson for the Senior Officers Meeting. Okay, the delegation of the Lao People's Democratic Republic has the floor.
Okay. Yes, Excellency, on behalf of the government and delegacy of Lao PDR, I propose the nomination loyal government of Bhutan and chair of 35 session of APRC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The delegation from Samoa has the floor.
Excellency, the delegation of the independent state of Samoa is pleased to second the proposal for Dasho Rinsen Dorji, Honorable Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forests, the Royal Government of Bhutan, to be the chairperson for Senior Officers Meeting of the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you, Your Excellency.
If there are no other nominations, then the Honorable Dasho Rinzin Dorji, the Secretary of the Ministry for Agriculture and Forests, Royal Government of Bhutan, is hereby unanimously elected. I would now like to request the Honorable Dasho Dorji to take the chair and the floor.
Thank you, David. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on Government of Bhutan, I thank you for electing me as the chairperson of the Senior Officers Meeting of the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. It is a privilege and an honor indeed for me to chair this meeting of the most important agriculture officials of the region and to steer discussions that will greatly influence the course of agriculture in the future, and especially to respond to the challenges and difficulties presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we consider the substantive issues before us, let me ask your compliance and cooperation with a few rules of procedure of the virtual modality. May I request you, when speaking, I ask that you please be as concise and brief as possible, because the timetable is tight and we have fewer hours in this online conference than in an in-person venue. As is traditional, order of speaking will be on a first-come, first-served basis. Should any member wish to make a second intervention within the same session, please note all first interventions will be made and then requests for second interventions will be handled in the usual order of request. I would like to acknowledge the written comments received from a number of countries that have already been posted in the members' dialogue area. I invite members to read these comments online. Finally, the drafting committee will convene today at 1600 hours Bangkok time by a separate Zoom link. It is open to all member countries. If you would like to join and have not yet received the link, please write by email to aprc35@fao.org. With these few procedures, we should be able to smoothly conduct the meeting. Thank you for your cooperation. We now turn to the election of the vice chair for the conference. The virtual modality makes a small departure away from the tradition and precedent of the senior officers meeting that all heads of delegations of vice minister or secretary of agriculture rank are elected as vice chairpersons. Instead, the meeting invites nomination for a single vice chair. In the event that the chair is temporarily unable to conduct the meeting, the vice chair would do so until the chair is able to resume his duties. Thank you, distinguished delegates. I now ask for nominations from the floor. May I call on the delegates or delegation from Nepal, or head of the delegation from Nepal, to propose for the nomination of the vice chair, please. Delegation from Nepal, you have the floor.
Excellency, the delegation of the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal is pleased to propose Mr. Rodolfo V. Vaisera, Under Secretary for Policy, Planning, Research and Development and Project Development of the Philippines to be the Vice Chairperson for the Senior Officers Meeting of the 35th session of FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the delegation from Nepal, for proposing the nomination of the Vice Chair. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other delegations that would like to support or oppose? I can see a hand. The delegation from Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Excellency, the delegation of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka is pleased to second the proposal of the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal for Mr. Rodolfo V. Vaisera, Under Secretary for Policy, Planning, Research and Development and Project Development of the Philippines to be the Vice Chairperson for Senior Officers Meeting of the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you so much, honorable delegation from Sri Lanka. Are there any other nominations? I see that there are no nominations. Thank you. I hereby declare that the Honorable Undersecretary of the Philippines, Mr. Rodolfo V. Vaisera, is elected as the Vice Chair. We will now move to the election of the rapporteur. I would now like to request nominations from the floor for the appointment of the rapporteur. I see a hand. May I invite the delegation from Indonesia to nominate and propose for the appointment of the rapporteur.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The delegation of Republic of Indonesia is pleased to propose Ms. Vaninda Kunirdet, Director of Bureau Foreign of Agriculture Affairs from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperative of Delegation of Thailand, to be the reporter for the Senior Officer Meeting of the 35th session of FAO Regional Conference for Asia and Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the delegation from Indonesia. I see another hand. Can I call on the delegation from China to take the floor, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, everyone. The delegation of the People's Republic of China is glad to second the proposal of the Republic of Indonesia for Ms. Vanida Kemonpech, Director of the Bureau of Foreign Agricultural Affairs from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperative, and the delegation of Thailand to be the rapporteur for this senior officer meeting of the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you all.
Thank you, honorable delegation from China. Ms. Vanida, Director of the Bureau of Foreign Agriculture Affairs from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives of Thailand, has been nominated by the delegation of the Republic of Indonesia and seconded by the delegation of the Republic of China. Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, I confirm the appointment of the rapporteur, Ms. Vanida. I would like to make a few remarks on the process of finalizing the senior officers meeting report. As you are aware, this is the first ever virtual regional conference for the FAO. The modality has made it simpler for delegates to attend the meeting from the comfort of their own homes and country. At the same time, extensive direct consultation, like during a physical meeting, is difficult. Moreover, our members are spread over multiple time zones and cannot be present during all the hours of this meeting. The drafting committee has to work and deliver under these challenges. As you are aware, the FAO Secretariat has already circulated a near complete draft conference report and obtained your comments 1 week ago. We now have a draft SOM report that incorporates all your useful comments. This text reflects your common consensus and should preferably not be opened up for further discussion. The rapporteur and the FAO Secretariat will incorporate points from the real-time proceedings of day 1 into the draft report. The drafting committee should ensure that these are reflected accurately. Please note that due to the time difference with Rome, the drafting committee has only an hour to complete this work so that the Secretariat can send the draft report to Rome for translation. The translated reports will be received during the night and then again circulated early tomorrow morning for members to read. As you are aware, the drafting committee will meet in Zoom modality using a different Zoom link than that for this meeting. If you do not have the drafting committee Zoom link and would like to participate, please contact again the same email that we talked about before, which is aprc35@fao.org by email, and a staff who will respond very quickly with the link as they are constantly monitoring this account. We hope to see many of you there. All countries are invited to participate, but unfortunately, observers cannot participate in that meeting. Before proceeding to the substantive deliberations of this conference, I would like to seek your formal agreements to hold the conference virtually. As you are aware, consultations have been held by and on behalf of the Director General with the Royal Government of Bhutan, myself as the chairperson, and the members of this regional conference. In these consultations, the members indicated their consent to convene the conference by virtual means in light of the exceptional prevailing circumstances caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the important work of the organization that must be advanced through our deliberations. As you are aware, the general rules of the organization and the rules of procedure of the Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific presuppose that sessions be convened in person. For the purposes of our session, I now formally ask for the conference's approval to exceptionally waive any rules of procedure that are incompatible with the convening of a virtual session in accordance with Rule XXXV, paragraph 5 of the General Rules of the organization. This decision would be taken on an exceptional basis for the purpose of If you have any objection to proceeding in this way, please virtually raise your hand. Okay. I see no objections to this proposal. I take it that the conference agrees on an exceptional basis to hold this session virtually, and for this purpose to suspend those rules of procedure that may be incompatible with a virtual meeting. Thank you. The conference will now take up agenda item 2. I say again, agenda item 2, adoption of agenda and timetable. Kindly note that the agenda has been developed in consultation with the member countries and through the Asia and the Southwest Pacific groups of permanent representatives to the FAO based in Rome. The agenda and timetable for the senior officers meeting, respectively, are laid out in the relevant sections of the documents APRC/20/1 REV2 and APRC/20/INF/1 REV2. Is there any discussion on these agenda items? The floor is now open. I see no objections. I see no hands being raised on the screen in front of me. If there are no more discussions on the agenda and timetable, these two documents which I spelled out before are hereby adopted. We now take up agenda item number 15, the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture in Asia and the Pacific, and FAO's response. At this point of time, I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Aziz El-Hibri, Senior Economist at FAO, to introduce the agenda item. Mr. Aziz, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I have a great pleasure to introduce agenda item number 14 and give a short presentation on the Secretariat paper on the impact of COVID-19 on agriculture and the Pacific and FAO's response. Unquestionably, COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented crisis of our lifetime. It is first and foremost a global health crisis as reflected in these sobering statistics. As of last week, the Asia and Pacific region registered close to 4.9 million number of confirmed cases, and the death toll has reached 109,000 and increasing. A global crisis that also translated into a staggering economic downturn. According to the IMF recent growth projections, the world economy is expected to shrink by close to minus 4.9%, a steeper decline for advanced industrial economy at minus 8%, and for emerging markets and developing countries, of which many countries of the Asia Pacific belong, the projected decline is around 3%. Taken together, the cumulative global GDP loss for 2020-2021, according to the IMF, is around $12.5 trillion. To put this number in perspective, it is as if the entire US or 90% of the US annual economic output, evaluated at 14 trillion, is wiped out as a result of the pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic also aggravated the global food insecurity situation, although it did not result in a full-blown food crisis as initially feared. According to the latest report by FAO, WHO, WFP, IFAD, and UNICEF on food insecurity released in July, in which the author added a supplemental analysis of the impact of COVID using different scenarios based on IMF growth projections, it was found that between 83 and 132 million more people will be undernourished in 2020 as a result of COVID, and close to 6.7 million more children will also suffer from acute malnutrition. Understanding these are preliminary figures, as the full scale and full scope of COVID pandemic is not yet completely known nor fully documented. Within the Asia Pacific region, since the onset of the pandemic and the lockdown measures in March, the first interest was to look at the impacts of this pandemic on the food situation. And FAO supported many member countries in the region in early rapid impact assessments, focusing on any potential disruptions to food supply chains, as well as constraints and challenges to the current production, field operations, as well as the implications on food security and livelihood in rural economy. The Secretariat paper document our results from these 20 plus assessments carried out in the last few months. Just to briefly highlight some of the main results, Although we did not experience a full-blown food crisis, many market disruptions were reported for a number of value chains and products caused by both on demand and supply shocks. On the demand side, the loss of income, the loss of jobs, the closure of businesses, the restrictions of movement, even rumors and misperceptions about how the virus spread, all had an impact in reducing demand and consumption of many commodities, and therefore disrupting the markets. The most affected were generally the perishable products, such as fruit and vegetables, animal and fish products, as well as imported food, as trade flows were also disrupted. Staples and cereals in general were less affected, fortunately, because of initial high food reserves within the global markets, which enable prices to stay stable or even decline as demand reduced. Obviously, the COVID lockdown induced a number of labor and transport restrictions, which had an impact on disruptions for harvesting for many critical products like rice and fruit and vegetables in many countries, also inducing a lot of food loss reported in several situations. Input supply shortages and credit service disruptions also hampered planting season in many countries, prompting governments to enact emergency remedies in order to minimize the impact on the current growing season. COVID-19 impact and the disruptions to the market also resulted in income losses for small-scale farmers, herders, and fisher folks, especially those who most suffered from market losses. There were also a lot of income and employment loss due to the impact on informal activities, which disproportionately hit or affected women and youth. There was also the added problem of a reverse migration, both in country from urban to rural areas as well as across borders, which presented many countries with added challenges of either shortage of labor for outflowing migrants or an influx of surplus labor that need employment at the time when countries faced with health crisis. So we documented many of these impact assessments and were able to provide the kind of policy guidance for government as they shifted their attention from early impact into response planning as in the medium term. And FAO has been able to document a number of proposals and recommendations for how to rebuild food systems along resilience and inclusive foundation, as well as preventing the next pandemic disease. The report highlights a number of these recommendations. I will go over them very briefly for shortness of time. One of the main reasons to rebuild resilience food supply chains is, of course, to strengthen the digital agriculture by expanding ICT infrastructure in rural areas and also investing in digital literacy among small-scale producers and small-scale business entrepreneurs. The COVID crisis also heightened the importance of strengthening local food production and also promoting short value chains, which to be enabled by the digital market platforms as the foundation for e-commerce, which became very popular in recent months as a result of COVID pandemic. Governments have also realized the significance and importance of strengthening intra-regional trade and keeping trade open, and working toward improving standard harmonization, and also coming to agreements on digital data exchanges to shift toward digital and paperless trade, considered to be essential to promote not only trade flows for food security, but also for food safety reasons. Preventing the next zoonotic disease has become a top priority, which will require, of course, strengthening food product traceability protocols, as well as, where available, delinking wildlife activities from agriculture and livestock production, monitoring encroachment, and tracking illegal trade, all of which require more country cooperation. Within urban centers, COVID also heightened the need to redesign fresh food markets to enable better or more robust monitoring of health and hygiene and track any potential disease outbreaks. Response options or a full response options include social inclusion, especially for vulnerable groups, which means expanding social protection schemes to rural vulnerable groups including women and youth and migrants, as well as a rural transformation and rural employment for youth or for migrants also need to be promoted along gender equity grounds. Now, FAO has been accompanying member countries since the onset of the COVID pandemic. In early actions, the focus was understandably on COVID-19 impact assessments. FAO supported over 20 country-level COVID-19 rapid impact assessments. It also carried out many regional analyses on food supply trends, documented in policy briefs. And FAO also contributed to the UN country team's socioeconomic impact assessments as part of overall UN socioeconomic recovery program under the Building Better Back principle. As a little glitch here. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. As countries shifted their attention to response options in the medium term, FAO also responded in kind by mobilizing its own financial resources through using TCP facilities for technical support, as well as redirecting existing trust fund projects for COVID priorities and raising new funds in several countries, again, for COVID emergency responses. Obviously, FAO did not work alone. We work in partnerships with other UN agencies, specifically WFP and IFAD, as well as the World Bank, throughout the process of helping or supporting countries in their impact and response programming, and now expanding our partnerships to UNIDO and others in the recovery phase. Now, okay, next slide, please. Now, realizing that COVID-19 is here to stay and will have its impact for over the next few years, FAO upped its game and developed a more strategic or ambitious program, the Umbrella Program, to continue to support member countries in their recovery efforts. This Umbrella Program, which is articulated around 7 priority areas defined in relation to our COVID impact assessment, also consultations from country offices, range from supporting improving data for decision making to social protection schemes, strengthening trade and food safety standards, smallholder resilience, and of course preventing the next zoonotic pandemic, and leveraging digital innovations for food systems transformation. In addition to these 6 priority areas, FAO is also contributing to the Global Humanitarian Response Plan, which is targeting 35 countries globally, 6 of which are in this region. Now, in order to implement more concrete programs out of this agenda and to share them with our resource partners and development partners, FAO is also realigning its own work program and its structure by redirecting its technical and financial resources to continue the post-COVID recovery support to member countries. The final slide. Can we go to that final slide, please? So I would like to conclude by inviting our distinguished delegates to share their knowledge and experience achieved in their respective countries on COVID response and recovery, and to provide guidance on FAO's comprehensive plan for COVID at the global level, but also provide guidance on FAO's regional priorities, which were reconfigured to focus or prioritize our continued engagement for COVID response and recovery at the regional level, and any other useful suggestions for stronger regional collaboration, which is more needed than before, along the lines of important topics like trade, food security, youth employment, innovations, and the like. With this, I conclude my talk. Thank you, Chairperson, and I yield back.
Mr. Aziz, for this informative presentation on a very pressing topic that is known to all of us. And at this point of time, I would also like to thank the FAO for all the support that has been rendered to many of the countries in terms of response to COVID-19. Before I open the floor to the delegations to speak on agenda item number 5, I would like to acknowledge the written comments received from a number of countries that have already been posted in the regional dialogue area. I invite members to read these comments online. I would request that interventions be no longer than 3 minutes. As we said earlier, we are going through a very tight schedule, and therefore I would like to request that your interventions be limited to 3 minutes so that all delegations have an equal opportunity to speak in the limited time that is available. The floor is now open to those delegations who wish to speak on agenda item 15. I can see a hand there. The distinguished delegation of Thailand has the floor, followed by the delegation of Timor-Leste. And after these two interventions, I would like to ask Mr. Aziz to respond to the questions. So Thailand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Thailand would like to thank FAO for the presentation. And also, we would like to thank FAO in conducting COVID-19 country assessment of impacts and response option on food safety, food security, and nutrition and livelihood. The finding would benefit for the post-COVID policy formulation of member countries in the region. Apart from the health crisis, COVID is impacting national, regional, and global food safety, disrupting agricultural value chain and international trade, and posing risk to household food security. Thailand has worked in close collaboration with WHO and we continue improving our effectiveness of public health for the preventing of the spread of COVID-19. The achievement of this effort have been indicated by the Global COVID-19 Index. In response to the people's livelihood and socio-economic impact, the government of Thailand has provided emergency financial aid to more than 10 million farmers who have been affected by COVID. The financial aid of over $5 billion has been transferred to individual farmer accounts. Additionally, the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperative has also implemented several measures to support Thai farmers by facilitating the implementation of the principle on the sufficiency economy philosophy to the farmer community, providing job creation in rural areas, enhancing the e-commerce platform, and supporting logistics and marketing for agricultural commodities. These measures will bring better livelihood of Thai people and farmers. Recent event of COVID-19 in food supply chain has created highlighting awareness of food safety for producer, business, government, and consumer. COVID-19 has also impacted on logistic restriction and disrupted the regional trade. For public health concern, Thailand ensure a continuum in food safety, hygienic measure, and international trade regulatory framework requirement for our agricultural products for both the domestic and export market. We will facilitate safe global and regional trade of agricultural products while avoiding unnecessary barriers to trade. Mr. Chairperson, COVID-19 is testing our resilience across all sectors. The pandemic helps us relook and revisit our strategy and our food system. Thailand is pleased to continue working with FAO. We look forward to share our experience, especially in hand-in-hand initiatives to our other members. We would like to conclude that we need to strengthen our global solidarity and partnership, and we support FAO to continue to work in providing expertise and resources to assist members in dealing with COVID-19 in short, medium, and long terms. Thank you.
From Thailand for your experiences and also for the kind words that you shared. I now request the distinguished delegate from Timor-Leste, which will be followed by the distinguished delegate from India. Timor-Leste, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear us? Yeah, on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, I would like to congratulate the FAO management, FAO members, councils, ministers, the high-level officials, and all participants. Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen. We Timor-Leste, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, is continued support by FAO is continued to support the government of Timor-Leste in the development of the agriculture sector and improve food security. We would like to thank also the technical assistance on various policies formulation to proceed, strengthening for the international food security, coordination and monitoring, as well as strengthening the monitoring evaluation system of Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. And also the important contribution made to the intersectoral coordination through the first program and express strong needs for its continuation for at least another 2 years to keep the momentum going. We also, the Ministry of Agriculture, also thanks to the FAO for the technical support in preparing and implementing the first year of Timor-Leste agriculture census in 2019. This is the first agriculture statistic data collection since 2004, forming an important evidence based on pre-COVID baseline with technical guidelines for the FAO. This agriculture census was one of the first of the region to use tablet-based electronic data collection and handheld GPS devices for crop area measurement. We also acknowledge the support by the FAO for the important food security and the information, particularly support to the national food security, information and early warning, the vulnerability to natural hazards, African soy fever, and fall armyworm assessment and needs arise. Results said that FAO support the scaling up the conservation of agricultural technology and practices, capacity building to improve disaster risk management in the agriculture sector, including early warning. We also recognize that despite recent progress, the prevalence of the food insecurity and malnutrition remains very high in Timor-Leste. The first integrated food security phase classification analyzing Timor-Leste found that only a quarter, 25% of the population is considered food secure. 36% suffers a chronic food insecurity, including 21% who experience moderate chronic food insecurity. That you can say APRC level 3, and 50% of who experience severe chronic food insecurity, we call it the APRC level 4. The census surveys indicates that the situation has worsened with the recent global COVID-19 pandemic situation. Sporadic shortages issues were reported across the country to the impact of the movement restriction put in place by the government during the first and second quarter of the year. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the government is committed to improve food security and nutrition status of its citizens, thus it's now increasing the investment in agriculture, including sustainable fisheries, to improve fish supply in the country. The government recently endorsed a fisheries to improve fish supply to the country, and we endorsed a COVID-19 economic recovery strategy where high priority is placed on boosting local agricultural production to at least meet 50% of national food nutrition, demand, and has in a plan of food basket or food voucher multi-meal program with aim to sustainable to stimulate the local production. Also recognize that the multiple risks to agriculture. We appreciate the FAO's promotion of sustainable and resilient food system approach. We request for FAO's continued technical support in various sectors for the MAF to adopt this approach and realize the national objectives to improve the food security and nutrition, reduce poverty, and advise the SDGs. The government is eager to endorse a country-wide adoption of the CA technology and other climate smart agriculture fisheries and forestry technology to better adapt to climate change. As with the Pacific States, the government of Timor-Leste recognized the importance of the fisheries sector for food security, livelihoods, and resilience building. However, its consumption in Timor-Leste is low at 6.1 kg per person per year. We aim to raise this to 15 kg per person per year, with big challenges requiring cooperation and coordination at all levels and with many agencies and development partners. In order to manage water for agriculture under condition of water scarcity, Timor-Leste government is preparing a big infrastructure project for building 3 water collection structures for agriculture in the country, respectively the FAO's technical support may be required. The Timor-Leste government welcomes the FAO's invitation to join the celebration of for the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries or Customs 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the distinguished delegate from Timor-Leste. As I said earlier, earlier in the morning, I think we have to limit our interventions to 3 minutes. And that is for all member countries to have an opportunity to make interventions. So again, I would like to request all the distinguished delegates to please limit your interventions to no longer than 3 minutes. So now I would like to call on the distinguished delegate from India, followed by the Republic of Korea. Distinguished delegate from India, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, good morning everyone. And at the outset, I would like to congratulate FAO and the Royal Government of Bhutan for taking the initiative of convening this virtual conference for deliberating on very important issues and for cross-sharing of experiences and best practices. Just some initiatives which India took. India was able to prevent the pandemic from striking food supply chains and livelihoods of farmers by proactively bringing in enabling legislations and orders. Unfortunately, the crisis coincided with our harvesting period, and so we got all farming operations exempted from the exemptions, the restricted categories. And of course, by taking the precautions, due precautions and the SOPs issued to the states and following the community distancing, with the result, all farming operations continued as close to normal within these restrictions. And as a result, we were able to harvest our standing crop, which was our first worry. The second worry was to decongest the wholesale markets. In this context, the digital platforms came to the fore. We've been having a lot of digital marketing, but then these were strengthened during this period. And not just the Ministry of Agriculture, it became a cross-sectoral initiative, because Indian Railways pitched in a very, very big way to run special trains across the length and breadth of the country so that the farmers and the producing states and the consuming states were not affected. Then coming to the inputs, we were able to, because of the logistics being put in place, we were able to timely supply fertilizers, pesticides, and all inputs to the farmers, with the result that our sowing this season has been 20% more than the same period last year. So that way we have been very comfortable in our harvesting operations, transport, marketing, as well as the sowing for the coming season. In fact, our Honorable Prime Minister has announced an initiative which is called Self-Dependent India, which is called Atmanirbhar Bharat, and in which agriculture is a very important component. in which we have an agri-infrastructure fund, which has been announced for rupees 1 lakh crores, which is basically for the post-harvest structures, for post-harvest management, so that we do not have any more food losses and wastage. And India would continue to assist other countries by building a capacity by way of capacity development and sharing our experiences and technology together with support of FAO, and so that we continue on our path towards meeting the objectives of SDG 1 and 2, basically. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, the distinguished delegate from India, and thank you for keeping within the given time, which was 3 minutes. You made it in 3 minutes. Thank you so much once again. Now, I would like to call on the distinguished delegate from the Republic of Korea, which will be followed by the distinguished delegate from Indonesia. Republic of Korea, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my great pleasure to join the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. First, let me extend my warmest congratulations to Mr. Chair, Honorable Secretary Dashio Dorji of Agriculture and Forests of the Royal Government of Bhutan, and to Mr. Jongjin Kim as new FAO Regional Representative for Asia and the Pacific as of July 1st. I believe that 30 years of distinguished career in public service in Korea, as well as those in FAO headquarters and regional office, will serve him well in this new role. Also, on the same date, we welcome our first head of the FAO Partnership and Liaison Office in Seoul, Dr. Shen-Yao Tang. He has taken a successful first step by launching the Seoul-based FAO office amid the COVID-19 pandemic. By opening the office in Korea, I'm convinced that cooperation between Korea and the FAO will be further strengthened. March this year, WHO declared the COVID-19 outbreak a global pandemic. Although 6 months have passed, the virus is still spreading. Millions of people in Asia and the Pacific have difficulty in accessing healthy diet as the food supply chain has been disrupted. COVID-19 fueled uncertainty, and food security has become a main issue. As it becomes harder to have face-to-face interaction, both labor and living environments have rapidly gone digital. More people are working at home. As they stay at home, increasing number of people go online to buy agricultural products. With the growing importance of the e-commerce, relevant business and standards have become even more important. As demand for social distancing has grown up, rural community have gained interest. Korea would like to commend the measure taken by FAO to respond to the pandemic. FAO promptly diagnosed the impact of COVID-19. Also, the organization provided them with support from short-term emergency aid to mid-term investment. Korean government has come up with a mid to long-term plan to reset the roles of agriculture and rural areas. This plan will be implemented in connection with Korean New Deal initiative, a pan-government policy. First, we will increase domestic production capacity of major grains. Second, in order to prepare for contact-free society, we plan to improve living conditions of rural areas. Third, we will promote digitalization in the food system. Also, Korea is sharing its smart farming experience so that residents of neighboring countries in the Asia-Pacific region can regain their economic foothold. I wish the current crisis can be an opportunity for deepening agricultural cooperation in Asia-Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from the Republic of Korea. And now would like to call on the distinguished delegate from Indonesia. Which will be followed by the distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. First, Indonesia, please.
Excellency, Mr. Chairperson, Indonesia delegation would like to appreciate the work by FAO to conduct this meeting at this challenging time for all of us. My sincere appreciation is extended to the government of King the Kingdom of Bhutan, for bringing us today together virtually to extend view and experiences in ensuring sustainable agriculture and food security in the region. To overcome the pandemic impact across the food system and keep providing food for 267 million Indonesians, the government of Indonesia focused on efforts primarily on three areas. Firstly, is preserving the sustainability of food supply chains by increasing food production capacity, strengthening food reserve at national, regional, and community level, as well as improving national food logistics system. Secondly, protecting our farmer and fishermen. Our commitment to assist and protecting them through the provision of the social safety net, social assistance program, and credit interest subsidy program so they could continue their activity safety and conveniently. Thirdly, promoting local food diversification based on our local wisdom through utilization of the home yard farming and marginal land by provide production local and nutritious healthy diet as part of our contribution to the UN Decade Family Farming. We appreciate FAO initiative to support the government of Indonesia short-term response addressing the most immediate effect consequences of ongoing pandemic on the food system in the country. Finally, we encourage FAO to continue the use of its expertise to collaboration with other development partners, including the private sector and civil society, to assist developing countries in dealing with the impact of pandemic COVID-19 to agriculture and food system. Thank you very much.
Very much. I would now like to call on the distinguished delegates from Bangladesh, which will be followed by the distinguished delegate from China. Bangladesh,
Honorable Chairperson and Vice Chairpersons, Assistant Director General and Regional Representative of FAO Regional Offices. For Asia and the Pacific, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, for giving me the opportunity to share the experience of Bangladesh on Agenda 15, the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture. I think you are aware about the success of Bangladesh agriculture, particularly about our self-sufficiency in rice production and tremendous success in maize, vegetables, and fruits production. Both poverty and food insecurity have steadily declined in Bangladesh and are on track to achieve related SDG goals by 2030. However, still here 1 in 5 remains in poverty and 1 in 10 lives in extreme poverty. The lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic has led to sharp increase in poverty depth amongst the already poor and in the prevalence of poverty as previously non-poor households fell into poverty and formerly non-food insurance insecure people became food insecure, while impacting disproportionately the access to health care, nutrition, education, formal and informal employment, which all has led to socio-economic vulnerabilities. The COVID-19 crisis reverses the gain made in agriculture, food security, and nutrition improvement. While women in the informal sector have lost their sources of income. Distinguished delegates, to cope with the adverse impact of COVID-19, the government of Bangladesh has immediately developed and implemented response measures to provide low interest rate loans to small and medium-sized agriculture enterprises, processors and exporters to continue agriculture production, developing improvement marketing systems and to ensure fair prices to agriculture commodities. Ministry of Agriculture has also prepared an action plan 2020 where 97 short, medium and long-term activities have been identified. Necessary sources were set aside to support mechanization at a low cost as possible and ensure continued planning to nutrient-dense vegetables crop to ensure nutrition security and resilient livelihood to fight back COVID-19 pandemic. As guided by Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Honorable Prime Minister, planting nutrient-rich crops on all available arable lands has been promoted, and the lockdown has not been imposed on transporting agriculture products and producers to avoid interruption in the food supply chain. To safeguard food security, the government has also increased the volume and subsidized the food grain provided through the public food distribution system, targeting 10 million poor urban and rural households, including fertilizer and seed subsidies announced to help farmers to maintain agriculture production and support to our fishermen also. Further, to support nutrition for vulnerable households, basic staples, lentil, molasses, oil, and fortified biscuits were distributed to households, also covering nearly 3 million primary and primary-aged children, as well as increased cash stipend payments to students and parents. Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that these actions are taking place timely and effectively, the government of Bangladesh has worked closely with FAO, other development partner, NGOs, and the private sector. Yet, further support is urgently needed to mitigate medium and long-term adverse impact of COVID on food and nutrition security and to build resilient and sustainable food system that ensure nutrition, healthy and affordable diets. Concrete areas of technical interventions by FAO should include, but not limited to, improving mechanization, commercialization, diversification, and climate smart investigation.
One more minute, please. 1 more minute, please.
Yes, reduce post-harvest losses and ease labor constraints, which will be reinforced by innovations, digital technologies, and transformation of food system. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Government of Bangladesh, I wish to reassure you and the international community that the government is committed to implementing the priority programs identified by FAO and the member nations and continue to address the unprecedented challenge and uncertainty imposed by COVID-19 through such initiative as the Hand-in-Hand initiative and the South-South Triangular Cooperation Scheme. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Once again, I would like to request the speakers to please limit your intervention to 3 minutes, as we have many hands raised, as many of these member country delegations have an interest and shown interest to actually make interventions. I would now like to call on the distinguished delegation from the Republic of China, People's Republic of China, to take the floor, which will be followed by Japan. China, you have the floor, please. Can you hear us? Okay, there must be some technical glitch there. Can I call on the distinguished delegates from Japan to take the floor, please? And then back to China.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants. And also thank you, Mr. Ajit, FAO, for his presentation. Food is one of the most basic needs for humans. So therefore, based on human security and to leave no one behind, Japan, together with FAO, has conducted improvement of nutrition, recovered and strengthened food supply, especially for those most vulnerable people. We will continue to work for ensuring the world food security. Under COVID-19 pandemic, strengthening the resilience of food systems in countries and the world is an urgent issue. Taking into consideration COVID-19 impact on food supply chains, food markets, labor market, food security and livelihoods in the short term, medium term, and long term, we need to continue our cooperation with member countries and relevant international organizations at the same time. In this regard, we'd like to introduce two examples about Japan's activities of collaboration with and support for FAO. First, in early April 2020, when the case of COVID-19 infection has newly discovered across the world, we provided to FAO our Japanese internal guidelines for farmers against COVID-19 pandemic as information support for infectious disease control. Second is about this desert locust. Considering that continued effort is important to strengthen the resilience of the food system, Japan has continued to provide support for capacity building in Central Asia to deal with desert locust. In this year, when COVID-19 has rapidly spread across the world, we are strengthening the support for the measures against locust in Central Asia. Finally, I'd like to talk about Japan's perspective on the relationship between COVID-19 and the United Nations Food Systems Summit in 2021. Japan believes that the SDGs can't be achieved without addressing COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, in the Food Systems Summit, measures to be taken during and post-COVID-19 should be regarded as a comprehensive approach on food systems, and we should accelerate our discussion for strengthening resilience of food systems. So thank you, Chair. Over.
People's Republic of China. China, are you ready? While we are waiting to sort out this technical glitch, I would like to call on Vietnam. Okay.
我能听到你，先听。Excuse me.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson of the Regional Conference, Mr. Kim Jong-in, dear delegates, good morning. The spreading of COVID-19 has caused a major threat for the food security of the region. Under the circumstances, the holding of this Asia-Pacific Parliament has important significance of addressing this crisis and safeguarding the food security. I would like to thank the Royal Government of Bhutan and the FAO for the thorough preparation for this online meeting. Ever since the outbreak of the meeting, the FAO has responded fast and handled difficulties, adopted a series of measures, helping countries to handle this this COVID-19 crisis and strengthened cooperation with countries and international organizations. FAO also gathered resources to help countries in order to avoid the impact of this pandemic on food supply chain. And we would like to appreciate all the measures taken by FAO. Chinese government always attaches importance to agriculture and rural affairs. And in face of this pandemic, we stabilized our production and supply of the agricultural products. And Chinese experience showed that the more we're in the process, the better we should stabilize agriculture and food security. And we also contacted South-South corporations to provide funds and technical cooperations to some other neighboring countries. And we made our contribution to the food security of this region. Today, the pandemic situation is still severe in our region. We should build the community of shared future and address commonly these challenges. Moving forward, we will continue to support all activities of FAO to respond to the crisis. We also call on members of this region to jointly act to restore agricultural production order, to reduce waste and loss of agricultural production, and to jointly safeguard the agricultural production and supply, as well as safeguard the regional food security. Thank you.
Thank you very much from China, and I apologize for this little bit of confusion that we had. I would now like to call on the distinguished delegate from Vietnam, which will be followed by Malaysia. Vietnam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me? So, on behalf of Vietnamese delegation, we would like to share with the meeting some of the influence of COVID-19 on the rural areas of Vietnam. At present, around 6. Okay, so can you hear me?
Continue.
At present, around 65% of Vietnam population live in rural area. Rural laborers make up 67% of the total workforce, of which 35% are agricultural labor. Agriculture play an important role in household livelihood, especially poor households. So in the absence of COVID outbreak, rural people are subject to many risks. In the long term, the COVID-19 pandemic will continue to affect agriculture and rural area through many different channels, both in terms of structure, demand, and market condition, employment and household livelihood, and structure of income and expenditure, including the social security issue. Most of the income of production households is affected by the disease. Due to the effect of the COVID-19 epidemic, household income will be affected, especially poor households with low accumulation. So the situation of falling back into poverty is likely to be higher. In addition, the number of near poor households is also quite high, with 1.5 million households. There is a high risk of falling into a poor group without special supportive policy on income and job creation. In order to support the agriculture and rural area to overcome the consequence of this pandemic. Special attention should be paid to supporting farmer and rural people, not letting anyone to be left behind. Proposing to add some rural residents such as farmer, small business, households, people working in the informal sector to include in the supported group. Accordingly, the goal of policy support targeting farmer and poor households is more likely to spread more strongly. In addition to ensuring the social security and maintaining political sustainability. In addition to very useful suggestion, we think that to improve regional food security and trade is need to improve global value chain and have a special solution to facilitate border trade among countries. That is our comment on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vietnam. May I call on the distinguished delegate from Malaysia to take the floor, which will be followed by the distinguished delegate from Papua New Guinea. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We would like to thank the Royal Government of Bhutan for hosting this historic meeting. We are confident that this virtual meeting will be very productive. We also would like to welcome the comprehensive report given by the FAO. It's very timely, it's very detailed, and we hope that it will be published, and the policy brief and data analysis is very useful, and it's very informing us about the real impact, the economic impact in the agriculture sector. For your information, Mr. Chairperson, the COVID-19 in Malaysia, since first detected in January 2020, has adversely impacted our food system. The Malaysian government is committed to ensure that our national food security will not be compromised in whatever circumstances. The government has promptly responded to this situation by establishing the Cabinet Committee on Food Security. Okay, so some of the measures taken is to support the farmers community, whether they are low-income group or the medium-income group, and also the industry. The government provided, for example, temporary income support and deferment of loan repayment to ensure people continue to afford to able to access to food. The government also provided incentive for the private sector for job creation, and also for those displaced by the impact of COVID-19 on the agriculture sector and the job market. To minimize the disruption to food production, the agriculture sector is one of the key sectors that have been facilitated to continue to operate during the lockdown. Distribution of food products has been strengthened through increased facilitation to the logistics sector and shortening of food supply chain. At the same time, the government worked together with the private sector to enhance and to increase the use of digital platform for distribution of agricultural product. We call for FAO to increase our collaborative effort, and also to work in data analytic and data collection at country level to better analyze and reflect situation on the ground. Through this, FAO could make important intervention to guide countries to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and build their agriculture sector resilient. With that, I would end my intervention. Finally, we encourage FAO to continue providing latest updates and data on COVID-19 and its impact to food security and nutrition and the food system. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Malaysia. We now go to Papua New Guinea, and in the meantime, I would also like to request the distinguished delegate from Singapore to be ready. Papua New Guinea, please.
Yeah.
You're on. Yeah.
Okay, Chairperson, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me provide a brief situation report on the COVID-19 and its impact on food and agriculture. On 20th March 2020, Papua New Guinea confirmed its first case of COVID-19. As of Saturday, 29 August 2020, the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in PNG stood at 459. Out of the total, 237 have recovered. There are 5 deaths and 222 cases are still active. Right after the first confirmed case of COVID-19, the Prime Minister declared a state of emergency on 22nd March 2020 for 14 days, which was extended a number of times up to April 2020. The state of emergency resulted in lockdowns and restricted movement of people, which had significant negative impact on the national economy, including the food and agriculture sector. Although COVID-19 was regarded as a health issue, it became obvious during the lockdowns that it was having a significant impact on food and agriculture as well. The lockdowns disrupted local and international food supply chains. Transportation of goods such as food products, farm inputs were disrupted and could not move smoothly from the coast to the highland cities and towns. Consequently, the government of PNG, in collaboration with a number of international agencies, like UN agencies, undertook a number of short and long-term measures to mitigate the negative impacts of COVID-19 on food and agriculture sector. FAO, through the food security cluster, organized the response activities focusing on 3 areas: conducting impact assessments to determine the impact of COVID-19 on food and nutrition security, carrying out risk communication plans and messaging, and conducting food market price monitoring. The results of the impact assessment revealed that measures taken to prevent COVID-19 transmission had an opposite effect on food and nutrition security and income generation by disrupting food supply chains, food networks, and agricultural food production. Vendors from agriculture expressed a loss of income from the closure of market and transport restriction. This had greatly impacted the ability to buy food, goods from the shops, and even from the markets. Moreover, travel restrictions have severely impacted food distribution networks and the food supply chain, triggering hike in prices of basic food items such as rice, sugar, salt, and edible oil. The disruption to international food supply chain in April 2020, caused by stronger demand triggered by COVID-19 pandemic, resulted in increased price of the main staples like rice in the Asian markets. This was a big concern to PNG as well, since rice is a major food staple in PNG, and the country relies on imported rice from countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, China for its rice supplies. The national government made an executive decision and opted for long-term policy measures to promote local food production for import substitution and to buffer against future disruption to international food supply chains, which focus on and give top priority to domestic commercial rice production. The national government also took action to provide funding support to the agriculture sector to safeguard the development activity of agricultural micro, small, medium enterprise and smallholder farmers. In May 2020, the national government announced 600 million kina direct funding support for COVID-19 from the 5.7 billion kina COVID-19 economic stimulus package. The agriculture, household, and business support was allocated 320 million kina, of which 130 million kina was allocated to districts to promote food production and food security. 50 million kina was allocated as price support for smallholder coffee, cocoa, copra, and 45.5 million kina was given to support rural MSMEs, and the remaining balance for additional stimulus activities. Technical and funding support for COVID-19 were also provided by UN through its UNDP Human Support and by UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. The FAO Food Security Cluster coordinated the UN prepare and response to address the impact of COVID-19 food and agriculture sector. Technical and funding support to address the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture sector also came from the Australian government, World Bank, International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, international food policy research, IFRI, and European Union, EU. To conclude, let me stress that the government of PNG is fully aware of the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture sector and has given the sector full priority in terms of funding support to safeguard it against the negative impact of COVID-19. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your intervention. Once again, I would like to request all the delegations or delegates to please limit your interventions to 3 minutes, because we still have about 8 or 9 member countries who wishes to make interventions and speak on this particular topic. So once again, 3 minutes, please, not more than 3 minutes. I would now like to call on Singapore to take the floor, which will be followed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Singapore, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Royal Government of Bhutan and FAO for the arrangements for this virtual meeting. Singapore would like to join our colleagues in expressing our appreciation to FAO for its contribution to the global UN response to COVID-19 and its efforts to perform rapid assessments of the impact of COVID-19 and the challenges to food security and food systems. We also note with appreciation the policy brief on the impact of COVID-19. Indeed, over the past few months, we have witnessed the widespread social and economic consequences of the pandemic. The pandemic has affected the entire food system, from global food production to supply chains, including the movement of food across countries. This will have an impact on food access. We thus need to ensure trade lines remain open to facilitate the flow of agriculture and food products, and that our air and sea ports remain open to support the integrity of supply chains. As we cope with the COVID-19 pandemic, we must work together to find ways to transit to a sustainable new normal. This is imperative to build back better, and we should continue to work towards resilient and sustainable food systems to ensure access to food for all. In this regard, we reaffirm our commitment to work together with FAO and fellow members to collectively strengthen the region's food security and improve the resilience of our food systems. We also thank FAO's work on sustainable food systems, as we note that this will feed into the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Singapore. Thank you very much for keeping up on the time. I would now like to call on the distinguished delegate from the Islamic Republic of Iran, and this will be followed by the distinguished delegate from the Philippines. So, Iran, you have the floor.
Yes, I am. Okay, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome all participants to the 35th session of the FAO Regional Conference and congratulate to the Bhutan delegate as the chairman and the Indonesian representative as the vice chairman. I also thank the FAO representative for the fruitful report on the activities and programs on supporting the countries affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. On the behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran government, I would like to inform all the participants that according to the experiences we've got during the crisis of COVID-19, we are ready to actively collaborate in all related projects regionally and globally, with an emphasis on those related to agricultural sector. The Islamic Republic of Iran think that the best way of management of the COVID-19 pandemic effect is to increase and facilitate the FDI. At the end, I do believe that this meeting will lead to fully practical decisions on overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I would now like to call upon the delegate from the Philippines, and this will be followed by the delegate from the Russian Federation for their intervention. Philippines, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Manila. I wish to thank the delegation from Nepal and Sri Lanka for endorsing the Philippines as Vice Chair of this conference. The Philippines appreciates the government of the Kingdom of Bhutan for hosting and organizing this regional conference with FAO. We also take this opportunity to congratulate the new FAO regional representative, Mr. Jongjin Kim. We commend FAO's efforts in maintaining the organization's safety and well-being at all levels and in assisting members in responding to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, as outlined in the comprehensive report APRC/20/12. In general, we support the suggested actions by the regional conference listed in the same report, and we would like to highlight the following. 1. We urge FAO to continue supporting members, including middle-income countries, with policy advice, measures, data, tools, and practices to overcome COVID-19 impacts and help in the development and implementation of recovery programs. Number 2, we encourage the promotion of livelihood opportunities for vulnerable sectors, including smallholders and family members, through the leveraging of COVID-19 umbrella program, financial reliefs, and investment initiatives. 3, we support strengthening collaboration with UN and other international and regional organizations, the private sector, civil society, and development partners in overcoming the challenges of the pandemic. We further appreciate the recent FAO roundtable meeting with the ASEAN senior officials of Ministries of Agriculture and Forestry on COVID-19. Finally, the government of the Philippines reiterates the importance of considering smallholders and family members and the scaled-up implementation of the UN Decade of Family Farming among FAO's responses to COVID-19 and commends the launch of the Regional Awareness Campaign for these sectors with ComDev Asia. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. And I would also like to offer my congratulations to you for having been elected as the Vice Chair of the 35th session of the APRC. Thank you once again. I would now like to call on the distinguished delegate from the Russian Federation, which will be followed by the delegate from New Zealand. Russia, please.
Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, we should like to thank the Kingdom of Bhutan. Unfortunately, the interpreter cannot hear the speaker. Since the start of this year, we've seen the start of a global pandemic. Unfortunately, the interpreter cannot hear the speaker. The FAO has been monitoring and unfortunately, the sound is clipped.
Sorry, are you hearing me? Yes, thank you. Sorry.
We should also like to note the positive impact of within the... Unfortunately, the sound is clipped. The interpreter is only getting bits and pieces and cannot hear full sentences. And the The interpreter apologizes profusely.
Механизм льготного кредитования, снижение налоговой нагрузки.
There have been also enhanced access and tax breaks, which have been introduced.
В России собрать высокий урожай зерновых. Одновременно с этим наблюдается рост показателей производства.
The grain harvest has been increasing, and also livestock farming is going from strength to strength.
Пандемии в первом полугодии в России произошел рост спроса на продукты питания.
In the first half of the year, in the Russian Federation, we saw increased demand for food.
Однако российские пищевые предприятия оперативно справились с задачей по обеспечению населения продовольствием.
Russian companies working in the agri-food sector have done a great job in providing food to the population. Currently, enough food is being produced to meet the demands of the population.
Рисков в области продовольственной безопасности. Считаем, что в этих условиях
We're also trying to reduce the risk of food insecurity. We also need to ensure that we curb price volatility.
стабильность сельхозпроизводства и работу пищевой промышленности. Это требует от каждого государства усиления.
This requires every government to work hard to implement sanitary and phytosanitary measures.
В свою очередь, это может негативно отразиться на покупательской способности населения и снижению спроса на продукты питания.
This can have a negative impact on the purchasing power of the population. We believe that our response should focus on, the interpreter apologizes, the sound is clipped, so I can only hear portions of sentences, not full sentences.
Продовольственных рынков и фермеров. В этой связи заинтересованы в более глубоком изучении воздействия пандемии на глобальный продовольственный.
We're interested in studying the impact that the pandemic is having on global food markets in greater depth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can I request the secretary to have this simultaneous interpretation? Because this one is taking a little bit more time. So thank you once again to the Russian Federation. Can we go to New Zealand followed by PG? PG, please get ready. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's late in the evening here. Good afternoon from here. And let me begin by thanking the distinguished chairman from Bhutan for hosting this first ever virtual meeting of the Asia Pacific Regional Conference. We are living clearly in extraordinary times, and this modality of operation is a reflection of that. Much has been said about the impact of the pandemic and its effect on global food security and supply chains. It is not my intention to repeat some of these comments, but simply to pick up on a few. In particular, much has been made on the importance of maintaining global supply chains and an open trading system, which is more important than ever to ensure adequate food supply and security right across the world. In this context, it is also important for countries to adhere to the global food standards and promote international harmonization and avoid imposing unjustified restrictions on food trade. We would also like to emphasize that food supply, food security is not simply about ensuring support on land-based resources. Fisheries is equally an important source of food security, and not the least in this Asia Pacific region, particularly among the small island states of the Southwest Pacific, which rely heavily on fisheries resources for ensuring adequate food security and maintaining good food nutrition as well. I would also like to call on the comments that I've made about the upcoming the Global Food System Summit that is planned for late next year in 2021. That is going to be very important, not the least in the context of the pandemic and the need to ensure that collectively we work together to advance the Sustainable Development Goal with particular reference to Strategic Goal 02. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the FAO for its comprehensive analysis of the impact of the pandemic in this region and the importance of us all working together to ensure that we continue to make progress and not let the setback of the last in the short term affect our longer term goal of achieving zero hunger and improving global nutrition outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. We still have about 10 minutes. I intend to wind up this session in the next 10 minutes, which is according to the agenda that we have in front of us. So if you are not able to, if you are not given an opportunity to, make interventions now, you can also send your interventions later in writing. I would now like to invite Fiji, distinguished delegate from Fiji may speak, may take the floor, which will be followed by Vanuatu. Fiji, please.
Mr. Chairperson and distinguished delegates, first, Fiji would like to congratulate the Royal Government of Bhutan for organizing the 35th session of the Asia and Pacific Regional Conference, especially the senior officials meeting. And on that same note again, congratulate the distinguished delegate of the Royal Government of Bhutan on his appointment as the chair of the senior officials meeting. Fiji reports its first case of COVID-19 in late March this year. As of today, we have recorded a total of 28 cases, and the rapid response of our health system managed to maintain the total active cases from spreading throughout the country. Fiji's agriculture sector provides an important source of livelihood, food and nutrition security, income, and employment to Fiji's population. Amongst the 191,910 registered households in Fiji during the 2017 population census, about 59% are engaged in growing crop or raising livestock, and about 61% of agriculture households, which is more than 68,000, reside in the rural areas. In Fiji, around 150,000 people have been directly affected by the impact of COVID-19, with 40,000 from the tourism industry. Therefore, the Ministry of Agriculture has set a platform having food and nutrition security strategy to assist all individuals that have been affected by this pandemic. In this regard, the Ministry of Agriculture has seized the opportunity through implementation of agricultural initiative to fulfill two of its critical primary strategic objectives. That is to ensure a secured Fiji with its food and nutritional security requirements, and progressively expand agriculture to its full potential in raising our national income and become the leading exporter for the country. The secondary objective, which is to ensure the improvement of livelihood to our rural communities, employment opportunity, and using sustainable agriculture practices to mitigate climate change. On the food and nutritional security strategy, Fiji has organized home gardening seed packages, securing village rice production supply, enhancing village nutritional security, and working on with rural communities on household long-term food security and village settlement household poultry meat supplementation. We are grateful to FAO, who has been assisting us continuously on the provision of seeds through our home gardening seed packages. Through our fisheries sector, there is a fish aggregation device installation for coastal communities, and fish feed and fish production have doubled and supplied to farmers. Through the forestry sector, we have also set up our digital platform, online application on forestry licenses, and providing incentive to communities for free planting. Through all of these initiatives, the ministry have been assessing the situation continuously with assistance of FAO on food and nutrition security in Fiji, and work to improve our response more efficiently in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So far, 19 member countries have made their interventions, and then for the closing of this session, we also have we'll have the presenter responding to some of these queries or making clarifications, and this will also be summed up by the rapporteur towards the end of this session. So we really need to keep within these 3 minutes. Once again, I request you to please keep within these 3 minutes. We have Australia on the list, but before that, we have Vanuatu. You have the floor, please.
Distinguished delegates and Excellency, Mr. Chairman, allow me to begin by thanking the government of the Kingdom of Royal Bhutan for hosting the 35th FAO Regional Conference for Asia and the Pacific. Allow me also, Mr. Chairman, sir, to congratulate you in your election as chairperson of the senior officials meeting. Chair, we thank the FAO for the continued support and for the excellent comprehensive report of a staple. Mr. Chairperson, economic impacts of COVID-19 are manifested in Vanuatu, although we have not suffered directly from the disease. However, in proactively responding to the COVID-19 challenges, the government of the Republic of Vanuatu is committing resources and redirecting development focus to the productive sectors, which comprises agriculture, livestock, forestry, fisheries, and biosecurity, by diverting funding support to the productive sectors to strengthen food security, enhance community livelihood resilience, and strengthen value-adding and food supply chains. Strengthening agriculture, livestock, forestry, and fisheries rural extension technical services through advisory service agreements. We are also strengthening agriculture, food, school food basket support, strengthening public-private partnership agreements, and also implementing a new initiative, a 70-30 public-private agriculture investment initiative, where farmers paid for 30% of the cost of farming and fishing equipment, and the government subsidizing 70%. The government is also investing on enhancing bush clearing units, increasing rural primary production through innovative farming technology, strengthening backyard poultry raising and mobile marketing, and lastly, Mr. Chairman, strengthening rural fisheries and forestry development initiatives, Mr. Chair. In closing, sir, we will continue to look to FAO for continued collaboration and technical support relating to farming in addressing COVID-19 impacts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We have now Australia. Australia, you have the floor, and Australia will be followed by Myanmar. Australia,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you, Chairperson. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Australia would like to thank the Government of the Royal Kingdom of Bhutan for hosting this meeting. We would have loved the opportunity to come and visit your beautiful kingdom, but obviously COVID has prevented that. But nonetheless, Australia appreciates the opportunity to be able to engage in dialogue with our colleagues from around the Asia-Pacific region in what is very important topics that we've got on the agenda. Australia would like to thank the representative of FAO too for the great short, sharp presentation that they did. There's some very useful information contained in this paper about the impact of COVID in the region and about FAO's response to that crisis. As highlighted in the paper, the pandemic's really reinforced the importance of comprehensive measures to ensure food safety, reduce zoonotic risks, and address transboundary animal and plant pests and diseases, and of the importance of open international flows of agriculture and food products, and of digital transformation, especially to support more detailed data collection. And we appreciate the paper's acknowledgement of the particular challenges facing Pacific small island developing states in the wake of COVID-19, and emphasise the importance of increased investments in data collection and timely food systems interventions. We'd just like to highlight, I guess, a few key issues out of the paper from our perspective, and that relates to zoonotic disease risks, transboundary animal and plant pests and diseases, the importance of data collection and data sharing, rebuilding food systems, and international trade. So the paper highlights the need to mitigate current and prepare for future zoonotic disease risks. And in line with the One Health approach, Australia strongly encourages strengthened cross-sectoral mechanisms for monitoring, early warning, preparedness, prevention, detection, response and control of zoonotic diseases. And in addition, we support the development of science-based international guidelines on more effective safety and hygienic measures for zoonosis control, including for wildlife wet markets. And we note the value of FAO's partnerships and welcome its continued collaboration with international organisations, including the OIE and WHO under their tripartite arrangement. And due to the link between zoonotic disease emergences and anthropogenic environmental changes, we'd also encourage a broader collaborative approach with relevant international organisations such as UNEP. We welcome FAO's commitment to the recent World Health Assembly resolution on the COVID-19 response, which reinforced the need for the tripartite collaboration to function effectively in order to protect against and support global efforts in managing the risks of zoonotic diseases. The paper also emphasises the food security challenges presented by transboundary animal and plant pests and diseases, and we note the critical role that FAO has both in regional coordination and in supporting national biosecurity capacity in countries. However, we feel that the rapid spread of fall armyworm, coconut rhinoceros beetle, invasive ants and African swine fever highlights weaknesses in the biosecurity, farm extension and communications capacity and capability at both a regional and a national level, which will require long-term implementable solutions as well as immediate emergency responses. In terms of the importance of data collection and data sharing, we think this really is essential for informed decisions, and we encourage FAO and other multilateral organisations to invest in data collection and in sharing data. And the situation in the Pacific illustrates the challenges from a lack of data. And that means the global publications on food security, such as those through FAO and WFP, often don't provide insights into the Pacific. And in response to this lack of data, Australia's recently provided funding to the WFP to support rapid food security assessments in a number of Pacific countries, and to the FAO to undertake rapid assessments in Papua New Guinea. And we'd be quite keen for FAO and others to share their data collaboration, their data collection and dissemination to maximise the sort of impact and benefit of that. In terms of the need to rebuild food systems, the paper suggests a range of ways to do that. And we agree that due to the diversity of circumstances, countries must be able to choose the right tools and practices for local environmental and soil conditions and apply appropriate regulatory arrangements that recognise technology availability for farmers around the world. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to sustainability. And just lastly, Chair, the paper highlights the disruptions to international trade flows resulting from COVID-19 and the critical role an open trade system plays in contributing to food security, the importance of deepening intra-regional trade, as well as the need for trade policies that secure diverse food sourcing from international markets that complement domestic food supply. And at the same time, though, we acknowledge that strengthening domestic value chains is also critically important for achieving food security, particularly in import-dependent Pacific Island countries. Now, we've seen with COVID-19, it's created the impetus to further digitalise trade, thus helping to lower certification costs and speed up customs procedures. And Australia is keen to work with our trading partners to see how we can maintain some of these trade facilitative measures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Australia. We have on the list Myanmar, and after Myanmar, it will be the opportunity will be given to Afghanistan. So Myanmar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, to behalf of the Myanmar delegation, I would like to congratulate the Royal Government of Bhutan for hosting this important meeting. For many Myanmar countries already discussed negative of COVID-19 as well as their response strategy and mechanism to address food insecurity. However, we cannot expect all the pandemic can be finished, and COVID-19 will last for some time until the vaccine develops in Vietnam. We already recognize the severe economic downturn, and as well as more importantly, food system is already completed. And moreover, as that in terms of the many food insecurity of another household common problem suffering by the market. My discussion point is we need to review current response is sufficient to address food insecurity. That's why I would like to ask the FAO to deep evaluation and support to member countries to address food insecurity. Even the IOS organized FAO has fund already oriented almost $20 million to support COVID-19. It is not sufficient. So FAO and member should see resource mobilization. Second issue, I would like to ask FAO to develop community strategy and together with the development strategy to address insecurity in future or long-term. Myanmar is sure about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Myanmar. We now go to Afghanistan, which will be followed by Solomon Islands. Afghanistan, 3 minutes, please. Solomon Islands, 3 minutes, please. Afghanistan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank FAO for arranging this 35th regional conference for the Asia and the Pacific, and also the Royal Government of Bhutan for hosting this important conference. Impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture in Afghanistan. With the onset of COVID-19, Afghanistan has been adversely affected, especially in food supply of wheat and wheat flour. It was due to closure of borders that resulted in increasing prices, and country remained short with access to wheat flour, rice, and cooking oil. But gradually, such problems were solved up to a considerable extent. In the cultivation and harvest, luckily, no major impact was seen in the cultivation and harvest of agricultural produce throughout the country. Fortunately, the country has achieved approximately 10% of increase in total agricultural production comparing to year 2019. Since summer season is the harvest for the major agriculture products, mainly fruits and vegetables, and these are supplied and exported to the regional countries. However, due to lockdown in the importing countries and borders closure, issue of trade in transit remains a considerable challenge towards our agriculture production export. This may further risk our farmers to not sell their produce or with a very low price. Next season, this may weaken our farmer to procure the inputs for the next year crop. What we suggest is that the export to agriculture produce, the trade in transit should come to a spatial arrangement which may result into helping the farmers of regional countries. What we did in order to somehow mitigate the risk of the agriculture produce that we have, mainly in fruits such as grapes, apples, pomegranates, and vegetables such as onion, potatoes, and tomatoes, we started implementing a national project, an emergency national project, building over 12,000 structures which are at the farm level, may store the produce of the farmers for a period of 3 months to 6 months. This will help somehow the farmers to increase the shelf lives of their produce that may come back to the local market, or after the situation gets better, they will be able to export these produce back to the markets in the neighboring countries mainly. Our suggestion again remains as this conference being the best platform to call upon the neighboring countries and regional countries to work on the trade in transit, which may come back to a normal situation with measures for COVID-19 that would help to export the agriculture produce from a country to another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Afghanistan. Thank you very much. We now move to Solomon Islands, and at this point of time, let me also announce that we are trying to take a little more time to provide opportunities to the observers. And after the Solomon Islands, we have the designated CSO. So please get ready. Solomon Islands, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair and distinguished delegates. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share something on the agenda before us. We want to first of all join everyone in congratulating the Kingdom of Bhutan for hosting this this meeting. Yeah, I was also looking forward to come and to visit Bhutan, but it's not possible now, but hopefully next time. Solomon Islands want to acknowledge the report shared by FAO on the findings on the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture in the region. As we all know, this is a global pandemic and all the countries are impacted, and whatever that is shared and the observation is common to all of us. Despite the fact that we do not have any COVID-19 as yet, as a country that has a very low small export base, we are also impacted by the restrictive measures that is taken in response to the COVID-19. Like New Zealand, there are so many that's been shared by our colleagues, which are also common with us. But we just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the support from FAO in response to our call to support us in our response plan. It is very difficult. It is a very difficult time because all of the FAO members need support, but yet FAO extended its support to us, so we are very grateful for that. I just want to support the call by New Zealand on keeping trade open. I think for countries like us that rely on import, this is very, very important. The restrictive measures expose our vulnerability to the shock, and our poultry industry are suffering greatly because our farmers do not have access to day-old chicks because of flight disruptions. We also want to support the call by Australia in terms of the risk posed by zoonotic diseases, because we are also experiencing that already in the country, and it's impacting our food security and our livelihood. I think what the good thing that happened to us as a country is the is the realization that agriculture sector and fishery sector is very, very important, and the realization that there is the need to invest more on productive sector. We want to call on FAO to mobilize or to take advantage of this opportunity because of the attention now on the productive sector, especially agriculture sector, to mobilize support to support your members. I also want to emphasize the fact that the restrictive measures that is impacting us is making us realize the need for us to be self-reliant. Although we want to keep trade open, but we don't know what the future holds. We didn't expect the COVID-19, but here we are struggling to cope with this pandemic. So it calls and it demands on us as a country to build our self-reliance. So we want to call on FAO to support us in that area in ensuring that those areas that we heavily depend on outside, that we build our own capacity so we can support our own economy to keep standing in case similar situation, we face similar situation in the future. So I don't want to take much of the time because I am conscious of that. But other point that we want to raise, we are hoping that we will have other opportunity to intervene and share with you in this meeting. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Solomon Islands. We have two more speakers or two more interventions on my list, and those are the designated CSO representative, followed by the designated private sector representative. So before I call on to the next speaker, first we would like to invite Ms. Tammy Jones. Ms. Tammy Jones will be followed by Samir Pandit. So Ms. Tammy Jones.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to the FAO and the Kingdom of Bhutan for having us. I speak today on behalf of 43 leaders from 26 CSOs from Asia and the Pacific. COVID-19 has accentuated as never before how long supply chains are tied to the emergence and spread of disease by industrial agribusiness. We small-scale farmers, fishers, and indigenous peoples who have long advocated for food sovereignty and predicted this pandemic have never been so unhappy to be proven right that the industrial food system is dangerous. The world must act to address the causes of these pandemics, and we must act swiftly. We urge member states to reform the hazardous practices of intensive livestock production models that are causing a rapid increase in the emergence of zoonotic diseases, such as the novel coronavirus. Models that separate the breeding of livestock from where they will be grown remove a natural immunological firebreak. The same model of production then grows thousands of genetically identical immunocompromised animals in unhealthy environments, creating what epidemiologist Rob Wallace calls food for flu. If the current pandemic has not underscored this extreme risk to public health sufficient to drive governments to urgent action, then all hope for a healthy future is surely lost. We urge member states to adopt structural One Health approaches to address the root causes of pandemics in their governance of livestock agriculture and forests. We've seen a surge in demand for e-commerce platforms for the sale of food and government support for many profit-driven corporate platforms such as Alibaba and others. We would urge governments to support open source and community-controlled platforms, such as the not-for-profit global organization Open Food Network, amongst others, which both enable farmers to connect to eaters and to collaborate with other farmers. Unfortunately, many smallholders in the pandemic have faced the forced closure of their farmers' markets, while corporate-controlled supermarkets were deemed essential services. Governments must do all in your power to assert the essential service of local farmer-controlled markets, where fresh, healthy, local produce can ensure food and livelihood security for both farmers and local communities. The most resilient food systems during the pandemic have been those controlled by smallholders and communities that are not reliant on large, centralized value chain infrastructure. Just look at food system disruptions and the unequal burden of risk on essential workers from the terrible outbreaks in large slaughter facilities and the consequent mass culling of hundreds of thousands of pigs and poultry. Smallholders and indigenous peoples everywhere must participate in making decisions around the response and recovery to the pandemic, as assured in both the UN DRIP and UN DROP. It's up to all states to ensure these rights are upheld and that the world emerges from this terrible epoch with healthier, more sustainable, resilient, and socially just food and agriculture systems. Thank you.
call on Samir Pandit. Thank you, Ms. Jonas. Can I call on Mr. Samir Pandit?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very thankful to the FAO for this online regional conference. I'm Samir Pandit from the private sector, Indian founder director of Digital Poria, it's a digital pollination. COVID-19 has revealed multiple weaknesses in the Asian food system. There is scope in transformation with rural logistics, money movement, digital marketing, and the digital enabling environment. Rural logistics is the weakest link in the food supply chain. There is a need of development of collaborative digital system with which to improve first mile connectivity in the rural logistics. Digital marketing platforms offer the prospect of new, low-cost, more flexible marketing options for the farmers. Early evidence suggesting that digital marketing platforms are improving returns. Digital is the new age language. It facilitates the agri-food sector to find new market opportunities, improve food access, plus access to the finance and knowledge. We believe the backbone of this is the digital money. India is strengthening the infrastructure at this digital front, and digital money building an important role in Cambodia, Myanmar, in the region. Importantly, it is enabling the unbanked to participate in an increasingly less cash economy. The benefits are many. The technology enables money to flow through rural economics, more flexibility, fair trades, trustworthiness, transparency, and speed of transaction, as well as smart subsidies, credit services, financial aid, etc. And it is an absolute requirement for digital commerce. We recommend policymakers fully understand the benefits of digital money and be able to promote policies to enable the emergence of the thriving digital money sector. The digital enabling and the policy environment needs to be strengthened. Sharing data by both public and private sector will facilitate the emergence of more modern food farming sector. To increase the impact, solidarity and longevity is important. We in the private sector believe in the innovations. We hope with the partnership and hand-in-hand initiative with the FAO governments, it will play a prominent role. Thank you very much.
Now come to the more of a close of the session, but before that, I think there were 22 delegations from the member countries who made interventions, and then the final two, we had one from the CSO representative and one from the private sector representative. Thank you very much for your interventions. And these interventions were in relation to the presentation made by Mr. Aziz. So I'm going to offer the floor to Mr. Aziz for 2 minutes, please. Mr. Aziz, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I will be very brief in my responses. I actually followed very closely all the interventions by the delegates. There weren't many specific questions, but I would like to acknowledge or appreciate their acknowledgement of the comprehensive nature of our paper, which was actually enriched further by these interventions. There were a number of proposals that I picked up that reinforced both the paper and the proposals, and I would like to highlight few because they feed very much into FAO's umbrella program that I ended my presentations with. In terms of the points that were highlighted by more than one delegate, the first is the question of food safety and hygiene, which was highlighted by Thailand, and very much at the core of the recovery program. The question of trade, open trade, was highlighted by several delegates, and also the critical importance for those for food import dependent countries like small island countries. It's also well noted. There was also several references to data and the need to strengthen data collection, especially in a post-COVID environment. This was highlighted by Malaysia, Timor-Leste, as well as Australia. And it's one of our priority areas we will be, of course, working on. Throughout the different interventions, the reference to digital innovations has been strong and repetitive, and confirm actually the focus given to these transformative change that is required to rebuild back the food systems. reference to the fishery was a very well taken as a critical component of food security, especially for the small island Pacific countries. And we appreciate that that comment from New Zealand on that. Finally, just the comment on the food summit for 2021, which was referenced by a few delegates, and its connection with the importance of the food system approach, which FAO has adopted, and which is very critical to engaging with the fulfillment of SDGs as we cope with the long-term consequences of COVID. With this, I'll stop my brief comments, and we took note of all of these interventions, which are very enriching, and we will study them even more carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aziz. That was very succinct and very clear, and it seems that you have captured almost all the things that have been, all the interventions that have been made. We would like to go on, but at the same time, we have a constraint of time on our hands. And at this point of time, I would like to apologize to all the participants, distinguished delegates and participants, if you haven't been given an opportunity to make interventions, be it member countries or CSO representatives or the private sector representative. But at the same time, I would like to once again remind you that you can still send in your comments, still send in your interventions to the Secretariat of the FAO, and those will be displayed on the website, and those statements that have been displayed on the FAO website will be considered as official interventions that has been made. So once again, I would like to thank all of you for this highly relevant and important discussion. And before we break, I would like to give the floor to the rapporteur, Dr. Vanida, to sum up the discussions for this morning half of the session. Dr. Vanida, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the APRC for electing Thailand as rapporteur, and I look forward to summarizing the interesting and important discussions over these 2 days. Item 15, the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture in Asia and the Pacific, and FAO's response. We thank countries for sharing their knowledge and experiences on mitigating the impact of devastating COVID-19 pandemic on food and agriculture and livelihoods, which is severely testing the resilience of this region. 6 messages and takeaways. First, countries recognize that COVID-19 has caused widespread economic distress throughout the region and express concern that food system employment continue to be affected and could lead to an increase in hunger and poverty. 2, combined with climatic events, transboundary pests and diseases, pressures on scarce natural resources, countries would be pushed further off track with respect to the SDGs, which cannot be achieved without overcoming the impact of COVID-19. 3, countries share the policy, measures, and programs for direct economic and social assistance that were put in place to cushion the impact on vulnerable populations and ensure food security. 4, countries emphasize the need to continue many of the programs to provide safety nets, to foster the process of recovery and resilience, especially for smallholders, family farmers across all subsectors of agriculture, and micro, small, and medium enterprises. 5, countries agree greater focus on resilient food system at policy and program level, trade facilitation, especially at regional level, and incorporation of innovations and technology. 6, thank FAO for carrying out rapid assessments that would help policymaking and assistance to short-term responses that help combat some of the most acute impact of the pandemic on food supply chains. Countries also call on FAO to at least 5 to 6 points that follow. 1, call on FAO to continue its support to governments with policy advice, measures, tools, practices, and programming to overcome COVID-19 impacts and help design recovery programs in the medium and long term. provide technical assistance for transformative solutions and long-term recovery and resilience through development of inclusive and participatory policy for sustainable and resilient food system. Intensify technical and economic cooperation in response to the COVID-19 crisis, including for low and middle income countries and small island developing states. Food crisis countries in particular need to be supported more actively. Leverage the COVID-19 umbrella program and partnership modalities include South-South cooperation and hand-in-hand initiative to mobilize resources for building back better and support greener agriculture to safeguard the livelihood and smallholders and family. Encourage an enabling environment for consistent adoption of digital technologies and innovations, and support further digitalization of trade. And noted that fishery were emphasized by several countries that they have been impacted by COVID, especially the trade aspect. Before I conclude, I would like to remind all countries to provide the name and email address of one focal point to whom the draft SOM report can be circulated this evening. We have received names from 16 countries and look forward to receiving from all member nations by this afternoon. Please send the information to aprc@fao.org as soon as possible. We have a very tight timeline to finalize today's proceedings, and your collaboration will be highly appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Venendra. Thank you very much for your excellent submission of the discussions we had so far. And at this point of time, I would like to think that the first half of the first day of the SO meeting was a very good start. And therefore, once again, I would like to thank everybody and also declare this agenda item closed for now. And I would like to call on Mr. David Dowie, the conference secretary, to make some announcements. Mr. Dowie, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a break of about 1 hour, and we will resume at 1430 Bangkok time. That's about 1 hour from now. So even if you step away from the meeting, please remain logged in to Zoom if possible, or else we will have to admit you again from the waiting room. Thank you very much for your participation. That was really great. And we have a full timetable for the afternoon session. We'll see you in about 1 hour. Thank you.